Captain Edward Harrison stood at the bridge of the HMS Hospitality, his eyes fixed on the strange ship that had just appeared near Earth's orbit. The alien vessel was huge and dark, covered in what looked like weapon ports. But instead of ordering his crew to battle stations, he straightened his uniform and smiled. "Prepare the welcome package," he said calmly. "And Thompson, do make sure the tea is Earl Grey. We're making history today." Lieutenant Emma Blackwood watched from her station, hiding a small smile. The aliens wouldn't know it, but every teacup, every saucer, and every polite gesture had been carefully planned by military intelligence. She had spent 3 years developing what they called the Politeness Protocol, a defense strategy disguised as hospitality. The alien ship, 3 times the size of the HMS Hospitality, hung in space like a dark cloud. Its surface sparkled with energy readings that suggested powered weapons. But the humans didn't respond with threats. Instead, they sent a message that confused the alien crew completely. "Good afternoon. We hope you've had a pleasant journey. Would you care to join us for tea?" Inside the alien vessel, the warrior commander struggled to understand. Where were the weapons? The threats? The demands for surrender? Their scans showed that the human ship was well armed, but all those weapons remained powered down. The aliens accepted the invitation, if only out of confusion. They had expected resistance, maybe even a fight. Instead, they found themselves walking through spotless corridors, led by smiling crew members to a beautifully arranged conference room. Captain Harrison stood at the door, greeting each alien with a small bow. "Welcome aboard the HMS Hospitality. I trust you'll find our accommodations suitable." The aliens, tall beings with metallic skin, looked at each other in confusion. Their weapons had been politely but firmly requested to be checked at the door, "if you don't mind, for everyone's comfort." Emma watched through hidden cameras as she activated her secret scanning systems. Every teacup contained microscopic sensors. Each polite conversation was being analyzed for vital information about the alien species. Even the comfortable chairs the aliens sat in were secretly mapping their biology. "The tea is a special blend," Harrison explained, pouring with perfect form. "We find it helps with diplomatic discussions." What he didn't mention was that the tea's temperature was perfect for scanning the aliens' digestive systems, or that each sip helped Emma's computers build a detailed file on their biology. The alien commander, trying to maintain control of the situation, spoke in a harsh tone. "We came to assess Earth's defenses." "Oh, how thoughtful of you to take an interest," Harrison interrupted smoothly, offering a plate. "Biscuit. They're freshly baked. Our chef would be quite disappointed if you didn't try them." Emma's screens filled with data as the aliens, not wanting to seem rude, accepted the treats. Their weapons might be advanced, but they had no defense against British hospitality. Every bite told her more about their strengths and weaknesses. The meeting continued for 2 hours. The aliens tried several times to make threats, but each attempt was smoothly deflected with offers of more tea, polite questions about their journey, and concerned inquiries about their comfort. By the end, they looked thoroughly confused and slightly worried. As they left, Harrison smiled warmly. "Do come again. Next time, we must have you for dinner." Back on their ship, the alien commander stared at Earth through the viewscreen. Something wasn't right. They had come to intimidate these humans, to test their defenses. Instead, they had spent the afternoon eating small cookies and discussing the proper way to hold a teacup. Somehow, they had revealed more information than they had gathered. Emma reviewed the data from the meeting. "Captain," she said over the private channel, "Operation Tea Cozy was a complete success. We now know more about their species than they ever intended to share." Harrison nodded, straightening his already perfect uniform. "Excellent work, Lieutenant. Send word to command. Tell them the Politeness Protocol works perfectly." He looked out at the stars, allowing himself a small smile. The galaxy isn't ready for militarized hospitality. Behind him, the alien ship departed, its crew still trying to figure out exactly how they had been outmaneuvered by cookies and tea. Commander Oliver Kent walked through the grand hall of the newly built Galactic Reception Center, checking every detail one last time. 5 different alien species were arriving today, and everything had to be perfect. Not just proper party perfect, but military operation perfect. Status report. He spoke quietly into his hidden microphone. All scanning teacups are in place, sir, replied the voice of Private Mary Wells. Each China set is equipped with the new bioscanners. The sugar cubes contain data-gathering crystals, and the cucumber sandwiches have the updated sensor strips. Oliver smiled. In the 3 months since first contact, humanity had turned hospitality into their strongest weapon. Today would be their biggest operation yet. The first aliens to arrive were the tall, crystal-like beings from the Rigel system. Behind them came the furry ambassadors from Proxima, the floating gas forms of Tau Ceti, and 2 other species that looked more like walking plants than people. Welcome, distinguished guests, Oliver said with a warm smile. We're so pleased you could attend our little gathering. The aliens looked around nervously. They had heard stories about human hospitality. Some said it was more dangerous than any weapon. But how could they refuse such a polite invitation? In the control room below, Lieutenant Emma Blackwood monitored her screens. Each teacup, each saucer, each perfectly placed fork was sending her information. The Rigel beings' crystal bodies had weak points. The Proxima species couldn't resist the smell of mint. The gas forms changed color when they were worried. Commander, she radioed to Oliver, the Rigel ambassador just picked up the Chaman LT. Scanning now. Above, Oliver guided his guests through the reception line. Do try the scones, he suggested to the plant-like aliens. Our chef makes them fresh daily. What he didn't mention was that the scone's texture would tell them exactly how tough the alien's outer bark was. One of the Proxima aliens, looking suspicious, sniffed at a teacup. These gatherings, they happen often. Oh yes, Oliver replied cheerfully. We British believe that good relationships start with good tea. More cucumber sandwiches. The alien took one carefully, not realizing that the cucumber's moisture content was measuring its fur's density. In her control room, Emma's data banks were filling up fast. Sir, we've learned more about their species in one tea party than we could have in a year of regular diplomacy. The afternoon continued smoothly until one of the gas-form aliens floated too close to a restricted door. Immediately, a server appeared with a fresh tray of treats. Oh, you must try these, she said, somehow managing to herd a being made of gas away from the secret area without seeming rude at all. Brilliant work, Amanda, Emma said through the server's earpiece. The diplomatic deflection training is paying off. By the time the reception ended, the aliens were full of tea and sweets and thoroughly confused. They had come to gather intelligence about Earth's defenses, but somehow they'd spent hours discussing the proper way to hold a teacup and the difference between various types of biscuits. As they left, Oliver heard 2 of the Rigel beings talking. Did we learn anything useful? One asked. No, the other replied, sounding worried. But I think they learned everything about us. Back in the control room, Emma and Oliver reviewed the day's data. Their screens showed detailed scans of each species' biology, behavior patterns, and potential weaknesses. The tea offensive was a complete success, Emma said, scrolling through the information. We now have full biological scans of 5 major alien species, and they think they just attended a party. Oliver straightened his tie with satisfaction. Excellent. Send the data to military intelligence. And Emma. He paused at the door. Schedule another reception for next week. I hear the Andromeda cluster is sending representatives. Of course, sir, Emma replied with a small smile. I'll make sure we have plenty of tea. As Oliver walked out, he heard the alien ships taking off. They would tell others about the strange humans and their endless tea parties. But by then, it would be too late. Earth's hospitality was its secret weapon, and the galaxy was just beginning to realize it. Lieutenant Victoria Vicky Pembroke walked down the line of new recruits at the Militarized Hospitality Training Academy. The large building looked like an old British mansion from the outside, but inside it was the most advanced military facility on Earth. "Welcome to your first day of training," she said, stopping in front of the nervous group. "By the time you leave here, you will be masters of both combat and courtesy. Your teacup will be as deadly as any weapon." The recruits looked at each other, confused. One young soldier, Private George Turner, raised his hand. "Ma'am, I thought we were here to learn how to fight aliens." Vicky smiled. "Oh, we are. Jenkins, would you help with a demonstration?" An older surgeon stepped forward, pretending to be an aggressive alien diplomat. He walked up to Vicky, trying to look threatening. "Your world will bow to our," he started to say. "Oh, dear me," Vicky interrupted, smoothly stepping into his personal space with a tea tray. "You simply must try these lovely biscuits. I baked them myself." Her movements, which looked like simple hospitality, had actually blocked all his possible attack angles. The recruits watched in amazement as she continued to serve tea, each movement a carefully disguised combat technique. The surgeon couldn't find a way to attack without seeming terribly rude. "You see," Vicky explained, "aliens expect us to fight with weapons. They don't know how to handle weaponized politeness. Now let's begin with proper tea pouring stance, which also happens to be perfect for defensive maneuvers." The training was intense. Recruits learned to hide scanning devices in sugar cubes, to use tea trays as shields, and to gather intelligence through polite conversation. They practiced smiling until their faces hurt. In one classroom, soldiers learned about different alien species and their weaknesses. "Remember," the instructor said, "the Rigel beings can't resist Earl Grey, and the Proxima species get sleepy after too many scones. This is valuable tactical information." Private Turner struggled with the etiquette lessons at first. "I don't understand," he said during tea practice. "Why can't we just use regular weapons?" Vicky watched as he clumsily held his teacup. "Because, Turner, any species can build better guns, but none of them understand the power of proper manners. Watch this." She pressed a button, and a hologram of an alien appeared. It was large, scary, and armed with advanced weapons. Vicky approached it with a tea tray. "Would you care for a cup?" she asked politely. The hologram, programmed to act like real aliens, became confused. Its weapons lowered slightly. "You see," she said to Turner, "they don't know whether to attack or accept the tea. This hesitation gives us an advantage. Now fix your pinky finger position. It's also the perfect angle for activating your wrist-mounted scanner." As weeks passed, the recruits improved. They learned to gather military intelligence through casual conversation, to disable alien technology with perfectly timed tea spills, and to use dinner party seating arrangements as tactical formations. In the combat room, they practiced what they called the tea time offensive, using proper British etiquette as a form of psychological warfare. Aliens found it impossible to maintain aggressive postures while trying to remember which fork to use. On graduation day, Vicky looked at her trained diplomats with pride. They stood perfectly straight, smiled warmly, and could probably take down an entire alien fleet using nothing but good manners and well-placed refreshments. "Remember," she said in her final speech, "you are now members of Earth's most elite force. The galaxy fears our hospitality. When aliens hear the words, 'Would you like some tea?' they know they've already lost." Private Turner, now graduated, understood at last. His teacup handling was perfect, doubling as both a scanning device and a small shield. His smile could disarm alien diplomats, and his knowledge of proper dinner etiquette had become a powerful weapon. As the new graduates left to join Earth's diplomatic fleet, Vicky checked her schedule. A new class would arrive tomorrow, and the galaxy was learning to fear the phrase "more tea." Major William Lancaster stood in the middle of what looked like a perfect English garden. Roses bloomed along neat paths, fountains bubbled peacefully, and perfectly trimmed hedges formed an elaborate maze. But this was no ordinary garden. It was Earth's newest and most powerful defense system. Status check on all systems. He spoke quietly into his hidden microphone. Rose bed defense grid online, came the reply. Fountain radar arrays active. Hedge maze force fields at full power. T pavilion cloaking device engage. William smiled as he watched a group of alien diplomats approach. They had no idea that this peaceful garden was actually a military installation. The Galactic Confederation had sent them to inspect Earth's defenses, expecting to find obvious weapons and military bases. "Welcome to the Royal Garden," William said warmly. "Would you care for a tour?" The alien leader, a tall being with metallic scales, looked suspicious. Their scans had detected energy readings, but all they could see were flowers and fountains. "These roses are particularly lovely," William said, leading them down a path. What he didn't mention was that each rose contained a tiny sensor, mapping every detail of the alien's biology. One of the aliens stopped to look at a fountain. "This water feature. It seems to be using unusual energy patterns." "Oh yes," William replied smoothly. "It's a special recirculating system. Would you like to see it closer?" The fountain was actually a disguised plasma defense cannon, but the aliens didn't need to know that. In the control room hidden deep underground, Lieutenant Peter Morris monitored his screens. Every step the aliens took through the garden revealed more about their technology and capabilities. "Sir," he radioed to William, "they're approaching the hedge maze. Defense grid is ready." The aliens seemed particularly interested in the maze. Its perfect green walls rose high above their heads, forming complex patterns. "This is a traditional English garden feature," William explained. "Would you care to try solving it? It's quite entertaining." What he didn't tell them was that the maze's pattern was actually a giant circuit board. The hedges contained energy fields that could trap any attacking force. The aliens walked through it, completely unaware that they were inside one of Earth's most sophisticated defense systems. "Major," Peter's voice came through the earpiece. "They're scanning the T pavilion." At the center of the garden stood a pretty white pavilion where visitors could enjoy refreshments. It looked delicate and ornamental, but it was actually the command center for the entire defense network. "Ah, perfect timing for afternoon tea," William said. He led the aliens to the pavilion, where a table was set with fine china and fresh scones. As they sat down, hidden scanners in the chairs analyzed their weapons and technology. Each teacup contained sensors that studied their biological makeup. Even the sugar cubes were gathering data. The alien leader looked increasingly confused. They had come to assess Earth's military readiness, but all they'd found was this irritatingly peaceful garden. Suddenly, alarms blared in the control room. "Sir," Peter called urgently. 3 alien warships just appeared in orbit. They're charging weapons." William didn't even flinch. He calmly poured another cup of tea. "How unfortunate," he said to his guests. "It seems some of your colleagues are being rather rude. Shall we show them proper manners?" He pressed a hidden button on the teapot. Instantly, the garden transformed. Roses turned into missile launchers, fountains revealed energy weapons, and the hedge maze generated a force field over the entire area. The alien diplomats sat frozen, teacups halfway to their mouths, as they watched Earth's most sophisticated defense system activate around them. Their warships' weapons couldn't penetrate the shield generated by the seemingly decorative hedges. "More tea?" William asked pleasantly, while above them, the attacking ships found themselves trapped in the maze's scaled-up force field pattern. In the control room, Peter allowed himself a small smile. The Lancaster Gambit, as they called this strategy, had worked perfectly. Earth's defenses remained hidden in plain sight, disguised by nothing more than proper British landscaping. The alien leader put down his teacup carefully. "We may have underestimated your species," he admitted. "Oh, that happens quite often," William replied, offering the plate of scones. Biscuit. Admiral Margaret Whitmore stood on the bridge of the HMS Teatime, Earth's first battleship disguised as a luxury space cruiser. From the outside, it looked like a pleasure vessel, complete with viewing decks and garden spaces. Inside, it was packed with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said her communications officer, Tom Baker. "The entire fleet is in position." Margaret nodded, looking at her fleet of 5 ships, each one looking more like a floating hotel than a warship. They were about to launch humanity's first offensive operation against the hostile forces that had been threatening Earth's colonies. "Begin Operation Afternoon Tea," she ordered. "Send the invitation." Across space, their targets, 3 aggressive alien battle stations, received what looked like a perfectly innocent message. "The Earth Tourism Board cordially invites you to a cultural exchange event." In the weapons control room, Lieutenant Rachel Porter monitored her screens. "The scone launchers are armed, Admiral. Explosive tea cakes in position. The weaponized cream puffs are ready." The alien battle stations, after some confusion, accepted the invitation. They had heard about human hospitality, but had never seen it as a threat. That was their first mistake. "They're lowering their shields to receive our cultural delegation," Tom reported. Margaret smiled. Launched the first wave of catering pods. What looked like harmless food service pods shot out from the HMS Tea Time. Each one contained what appeared to be a full tea service. The aliens, following proper protocol, brought them aboard their stations. "Catering pods in position," Rachel reported. "Beginning Phase 2. Inside each alien station, the pods opened to reveal beautiful tea sets. The aliens, now used to human customs, gathered around to inspect them. That was their second mistake. "Deploy the Earl Grey Protocol," Margaret commanded. At her word, the teapots released a special gas that made anyone who breathed it extremely relaxed and agreeable. The teacups contained tiny robots that began hacking into the station's computer systems. Even the sugar cubes were actually high-tech scanning devices. "First station's defenses are down," Rachel announced. "The tea-cozy camouflage net is in place. They can't call for help." Margaret watched as her fleet moved closer, still looking like nothing more than tourist ships coming to join the party. Launched the second wave, the scone offensive. What the aliens thought were simple British scones were actually sophisticated explosive devices, but they were special. They would only detonate if thrown or dropped, making them safe to handle normally. "Ma'am," Tom called out, "the third station is trying to raise its shields." "Deploy the emergency crumpets," Margaret ordered calmly. A wave of what looked like perfectly innocent crumpets shot through space. They attached themselves to the station's shield generators, shorting out the power systems with their jamming devices. Inside the alien stations, chaos reigned. Their weapons wouldn't work. Their communications were down. And everywhere they looked, there was nothing but seemingly harmless Earth food and drink that was somehow defeating their most advanced technology. "All stations are secured, Admiral," Rachel reported. "The cream puff cleanup crew is moving in." Teams of humans in what looked like waiter uniforms boarded the stations. Their serving trays doubled as shield generators, their teapots sprayed riot control gas, and their aprons contained full combat gear. Within an hour, all 3 stations had surrendered. Not a single shot had been fired from a conventional weapon. Earth's first military offensive had succeeded using nothing but weaponized hospitality. Margaret looked at the captured stations with satisfaction. "Send word to command. Tell them Operation Afternoon Tea was a complete success, and ask the kitchen to prepare a proper celebration, with real tea this time." As her crew secured their victory, alien ships across the sector received the news with disbelief. Somehow, 3 of their strongest battle stations had been captured by what looked like a group of tourist ships serving tea. "Let this be a lesson," Margaret said to no one in particular. "Never underestimate the power of a proper tea service." In the kitchen, the chef started preparing real scones to celebrate. After all, Even military victories should be celebrated with proper British manners. Colonel James Sheffield sat in his office at the Psychological Warfare Division, watching recordings of alien reactions to various British social customs. After months of study, he had made an amazing discovery. Most alien species had no defense against passive-aggressive politeness. "Play the test footage again, please," he said to his assistant, Linda Roberts. The screen showed an alien diplomat failing to use the correct fork at a formal dinner. The humans around the table had simply smiled politely and said nothing, but their subtle looks of disappointment had made the alien so uncomfortable it had left the party early. "You see," James pointed at the screen. "They can handle direct confrontation, but they have no idea what to do with subtle social disapproval." Linda nodded, taking notes. Like when the Rigel ambassador put his elbows on the table and everyone just quietly sighed. Exactly. James stood up and walked to his whiteboard, where he had mapped out what he called the Sheffield Protocol, a new form of psychological warfare based entirely on British social customs. The next day, they tested the protocol on a group of alien visitors. The aliens had come to threaten Earth with their advanced weapons. Instead, they found themselves at a formal garden party. "Oh dear," one human host said quietly when an alien commander grabbed the wrong teacup. "How interesting that you'd choose that one." The alien commander froze, suddenly unsure. Nobody had said anything was wrong, but somehow they felt they had made a terrible mistake. "Don't worry," another host said with a small, tight smile. "We can always get more cups from the second-best cabinet." In the monitoring room, James watched the aliens' stress levels rise. "Notice how they're starting to sweat, and we haven't made a single threat." The party continued, and the psychological pressure grew. When an alien spilled a drop of tea, the humans simply dabbed at the spot with napkins, saying, "No, no, please don't worry about it. These tablecloths aren't the good ones anyway." By the end of the afternoon, the alien delegation was in complete disarray. They couldn't understand why they felt so defeated when nobody had done anything threatening. Implementation of Sheffield Protocol Stage 1 complete, Linda reported. "The aliens are requesting to leave early." James nodded with satisfaction. "Time for Stage 2. Send them thank you notes." The next day, each alien received a perfectly polite letter. The notes thanked them for coming and mentioned how brave it was of them to attempt human customs despite their obvious limitations. In their ships, the aliens read these notes with growing panic. They couldn't find a single word to object to, yet somehow they felt thoroughly insulted. "Sir," Linda called from her desk, "the alien fleet is retreating. They're saying they wouldn't want to impose on our hospitality any further." James smiled. His protocol had worked perfectly. Without firing a single shot, they had driven away an entire hostile fleet using nothing but impeccable manners and subtle social pressure. "Send word to command," he ordered. "Tell them the Sheffield Protocol is ready for full deployment. And Linda, do make sure to send those aliens an invitation to next week's garden party. We'll note their absence as regrettable." Around the galaxy, alien species began to fear these strange humans who could defeat you with a raised eyebrow and a disappointed sigh. Military leaders who had faced countless battles found themselves retreating rather than face the psychological torture of incorrect tea etiquette. In his office, James added another successful test to his records. "The beauty of it," he told Linda, "is that they can never accuse us of being hostile. We're just being perfectly polite." Linda smiled as she filed the report. "Shall I prepare the passive-aggressive response templates for tomorrow's diplomatic meeting?" "Yes, please," James replied. "And do include the one about their unique approach to table manners. That one always works splendidly." As evening fell, James looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien warriors were taking etiquette lessons, desperately trying to prepare themselves for their next encounter with Earth's most devastating weapon, British politeness. Intelligence Director Grace Hartford stood at the window of the Grand Diplomatic Hall, watching alien ships arrive for what they thought was a simple peace summit. She knew better. The aliens had planned to use Earth's own hospitality protocols against them, but she had seen it coming 3 months ago. "All the honey traps are in place?" she asked quietly. Her assistant, Robert Parker, checked his tablet. "Yes, Mom. The 2 small chairs for the tall species, the 2 large cups for the small species, and the anti-gravity settings are slightly off to make everyone just a bit uncomfortable." Grace nodded with satisfaction. The alien coalition thought they were being clever, accepting Earth's invitation to peace talks while planning an ambush. They didn't know that every bit of discomfort they were about to experience was carefully planned. "Let's welcome our guests," she said, smoothing her perfectly pressed uniform. The alien diplomats entered the hall, trying to hide their smug expressions. They had studied human customs for months, believing they could use Earth's strict diplomatic rules to their advantage. The first trap sprung immediately. The greeting line was arranged so that each alien had to break at least one cultural taboo of another species just to say hello. Grace watched as they struggled, getting more flustered with each mistake. "Oh dear," she said loudly enough for all to hear. "I do hope the Rigel ambassador didn't mind the Proxima delegate's left-handed greeting. In some cultures, that would be quite offensive." The aliens looked at each other nervously. They had come to trap the humans with social rules, but now they were the ones making mistakes. In the security room beneath the hall, Captain Michael Bennett monitored the situation. "The stress levels are rising exactly as predicted, Director," he reported through Grace's earpiece. Grace smiled politely as she led everyone to their seats. The chairs had been carefully designed to be just slightly wrong for each species, a little too hard, too soft, too tall, or too low. Nothing they could complain about without seeming rude. "The tea will be served shortly," she announced. "I do hope everyone remembers the proper handling procedure for their cups." The alien delegates looked at their place settings with growing horror. Each had 17 different pieces of silverware, and the cups had 3 handles each. "The custom," Grace explained kindly, "is to use all handles simultaneously while maintaining eye contact with your opposite neighbor. Oh, and do mind the correct spoon for stirring. The stirring spoon is never, ever to be confused with the lifting spoon." Robert watched as the aliens tried to follow these completely made-up rules. "Their coordination is breaking down," he whispered to Grace. "The coalition's communication signals are getting scrambled." That was the beauty of it. The aliens had planned to use the tea ceremony to launch their attack, but they were too busy trying not to commit social blunders to coordinate anything. "Is anyone finding the gravity uncomfortable?" Grace asked innocently. "We can adjust it," though requesting an adjustment is traditionally seen as a sign of poor breeding among some cultures. In the security room, Michael grinned. "They're falling apart, Director. The coalition's battle plans are completely disrupted." Grace watched as the alien diplomats struggled with their cups, their silverware, and their dignity. They had come to turn Earth's politeness into a weapon, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. Nobody knew more about using manners as warfare than the British. "Would anyone care for a scone?" she offered. "The proper way to eat them involves 7 distinct movements and must be completed in under 30 seconds. By the end of the summit, the alien coalition had completely abandoned their attack plans. They were too exhausted from trying to follow impossible social rules, too confused by contradictory customs, and too afraid of making even more social mistakes. A complete success, Robert reported as the last alien ship fled Earth's orbit. They never even realized the entire summit was a tactical defense operation. Grace straightened a slightly crooked fork on one of the tables. "Send word to command." The diplomatic incident protocol worked perfectly. "And Robert?" "Yes, Director." "Do send them all thank you notes," with slightly wrong titles on the envelopes. Captain Edward Harrison stood once again on the bridge of the HMS Hospitality, exactly 1 year after that first historic tea service. This time, he wasn't greeting a single alien ship, but an entire fleet of diplomatic vessels from across the galaxy. They had all come for the signing of the Galactic Concordat, a peace treaty that would change everything. "It feels like yesterday, doesn't it?" Lieutenant Emma Blackwood said, standing beside him. She had been there for that first contact, when they had turned a simple tea service into Earth's greatest defense. "Indeed," Edward replied, straightening his uniform. "Though I doubt any of them suspected that first cup of tea would lead to this." The great hall of the HMS Hospitality had been transformed. The longest table in human history stretched through it, with places set for representatives from 50 different alien species. Each place setting was a masterpiece of human engineering. Scanning devices disguised as cutlery, monitoring systems hidden in teacups, and data-gathering devices that looked like simple decorations. Commander Oliver Kent approached them with a tablet. "All security measures are in place. The tea is prepared according to the Lancaster Protocol, and the scones have been arranged in defensive formations." Edward nodded. After a year of militarized hospitality, most alien species had learned to fear the phrase, "Would you like some tea?" But today was different. Today they would turn that fear into respect. The alien delegates began arriving. Some walked, some floated, some shifted like clouds of gas. Each was greeted with perfect politeness and shown to their seats by graduates of Lieutenant Pembroke's Hospitality Academy. "Welcome," Edward announced once all were seated. "Before we begin the treaty signing, we thought it appropriate to have one final formal tea service." The aliens tensed slightly. They had learned that human tea services were never simple affairs. But they had also learned it was far worse to refuse. In the control room, Major William Lancaster monitored the defense systems hidden in the garden arrangements. Colonel Sheffield watched the psychological warfare displays, measuring stress levels and social discomfort. Director Hartford kept track of all diplomatic signals and communications. As the tea was served, Edward spoke again. "1 year ago, humanity faced a galaxy that thought us weak because we greeted aggression with hospitality. Today, that same hospitality has become legendary across the stars." The aliens sipped their tea carefully, well aware that Earth's greatest victories had all begun with similar cups. But today's tea was just tea. The real power was in what it represented. "The Galactic Concordat," Edward continued, "will establish new protocols for interstellar relations. And yes, they will include proper tea etiquette." Some of the aliens actually chuckled at this. They had come to appreciate the subtle humor of human diplomacy, even as they feared it. Emma brought out the treaty document. It was written on real paper, another Earth custom that had become surprisingly effective in diplomatic relations. Aliens found something deeply serious about signing physical documents. "With this treaty," Edward said, "we establish not just peace, but understanding. Earth's militarized hospitality will become a force for unity rather than defense." One by one, the aliens signed. Some used pens, others pressed tentacles to ink pads, and a few burned their signatures into the paper with natural bioluminescence. Each signature was accompanied by the ritual sharing of tea. As the final signature was added, Edward raised his cup in a toast. "To a galaxy united by the most powerful force we humans know, proper manners, and good tea." The aliens raised their cups as well, many of them now expert in the correct handling techniques. In that moment, the most feared weapon in Earth's arsenal, its hospitality, had become the foundation for galactic peace. Later, as the alien ships departed peacefully for the first time in Earth's history, Edward turned to Emma. "Send word to all commands. The age of militarized hospitality has served its purpose. Now begins the era of diplomatic hospitality." Emma smiled. "Shall I prepare the celebration tea, sir?" "Of course," Edward replied. "And this time, make it a proper English breakfast blend. No scanning devices needed."